don't understand the difference between iterables and enumerables, you are tired of hearing something is not iterable, don't worry, because in this video I'm going to cover what are iterators and iterables, how to use them, how to create your custom ones, and some real-world examples. You can already start using iterators and iterables in your own projects, or maybe not. With that said, let's get straight into the video. Iterators. Iterators are objects that define a sequence of values and a mechanism for accessing each value. They allow us to loop through collections of data and access each individual item in a specific order. This was the iterators. An iterable can be iterated over, meaning it can be looped through one item at a time. Some examples of iterable include strings and arrays in JavaScript, which can be iterated over. If you didn't really understand what they are, which I don't blame you guys because it's a little bit strange, I will tell you a metaphor. A book has many pages, and they are organized by the number of the page. And you can also read the content of each page. Each page have a content and have the number of the page, and the book has a lot of pages. Now, if you pass this to JavaScript, the book can be thought of as an iterable. As an example, an array, which also has the number of the pages, the indexes of the array. And the order in which they were put is the iterator. Someone chose which thing should be written or read in which order. And this order, more specifically, is the iterator. The iterator also has content and the index, but the iterator is also responsible for choosing an order for the content to be shown. I hope you understood it now. With the book, which is an iterable, with the pages that are the content, the index is the number of the page, and the iterator is the whole order in which they were put. In JavaScript, there are a lot of ways of iterating through data, and if you have here an array, const my array, this is my array. And if you want to normally iterate through it, you could use the for each, which we are not going to cover in this video, but you could also use the normal for loop, my array.length, and then you just need to console log my array. And this way you are going to check the value of every single item of the array. See? If you want to be even more professional with it, I'm going to show you guys two different new ways of using the for loop. Instead of this normal for loop, there is also the for in loop. And the in receives two things, one at each side. At the right side is a collection, easy. The right side is a collection. Now, the left side is a variable that is going to temporarily be each individual item. As an example, in the in, you probably are going to store the index of an array. So if you console log, you are going to show the index. And now if you come here to the thing, you can see that 0, 1, 2, the three indexes. If we put another element, you're going to see that we have 4 elements. The 0, 1, 2, 3. And now, if you actually want to access the array values, you can change it to I, just to be faster, and then my array of I. And this is basically how a normal for loop would also do, right guys? It's really just like this. There are still better practice, but let's just get to the next example, which is doing the for in loop with objects. So const my object is equals to name, age, job, unemployed. Now, this is my object, and if I want to pass through every single index, or even better for objects property, in my object, I can do so by console logging the property. Then if you come check, name, age and job. Those are the properties, but if you want to get a value, you can do the same as we did with the array. And there we go, Diogo, 19 and unemployed. If you want, you can also make something like this, in which you put concatenation with 2 dots, so you show the key and the property. As an example, name, age and job. Now, this is really cool. However, there are even better for loop, the for of loop. And the for of loop, instead of in, which goes through every enumerable property of an object, so indexes of array, the indexes of a string, each individual char, or even the properties of an object, which are by default enumerable. goes through the iterator of an object, so it goes already straight on the value. And if you want, you can come my array, so the collection of, so in the right it's always the collection, in the left the variable, const value, or the item itself. And you just need to console.log the item. And this way you are going to get the 20, no, you are not going to get anything if I don't copy the array, the way it is going to be undefined. And now if you can check 22, 30, hello and true, just with this, with the of, we just need to put the item. And why you should always use this? Because if you come here, my array dot bug, imagine it have someone putting a property, a custom property in your array. And if you use the in, and here you can put the I again, and you come my index, the array, my array of this index, you are going to end up showing the troll as well. And you don't want to show the troll, the bug, of course not. You want to remove this, and if you have this, if you put the off, item off, and you paste the item here, you can see that you only receive the stuff that you are supposed to show in the iterator, in the normal iterator, the default one that comes already in the arrays. Yes, this is pretty nice, however, the for off isn't perfect also. If you come here and copy this object, and try to use the for const item of my object, what you are going to get an error, in which error my object is not iterable. Remember in the beginning of the video, it is not iterable because it doesn't have an iterator. You might have already understood what are iterators, how they are supposed to work. How do they work actually in JavaScript? How can you access them and see them? To understand that and solve this problem, we will need to dive a little bit deeper into JavaScript to understand what's essentially an iterator. An iterator, by default, is usually stored in a property of an object with this Symbol.iterator. Of course, with these strict things because it is a property. So, if it doesn't have the symbol iterator, it's not an iterator. Even if the rest of the function is completely equal to an iterator, if it is not inside of a symbol iterator of an object, it is not an iterator. Objects by default don't have them, but there are some objects that are iterable and have them. As an example, an array. So const my array is equals to 0, no, let's start by -5, 5 and 50. This is my array. Can I even put some strings? I usually put them so you understand that it's really okay. This variable is already an array because of these strict things. And now, if it is already an array, it already has an iterator, so you can use them. Let's try to use it, right? So, const iterator, the name can be wherever you like, my array, symbol iterator, and you need to call it. You can simply do it like this, so this way you're already initializing an iterator to this variable. It's faster and it's more normal to do it like this. And then, what you can do with this iterator? Firstly, we are going to console log it, just to see what it is. It is an array iterator. Okay, nice name. And it has the array iterator itself, it's from the prototype. It also has the object, which is a symbol iterator, and well, we are not going to keep diving into here, but have a look. Next, there is a function inside of a next property. So this iterator has a next function returning an object, which looks a lot like closures, don't you think? You can call the console, let's console log it, the iterator.next. And as you could see, we call the .next because it's inside an object, so we need to put the .next in the parentheses, so you call the function, and we got my value -5, then false. Why? Because the first value is -5, and the done, it's because we haven't yet done the whole loop. If we come again, it's going to get the 5, and it was not yet done, because there are still items to show. And the next, she's still going to have more items to show. Still, the C, even though it doesn't have any value anymore, it's just to specify that, well, I showed something, I showed a value, so it's still okay. But now, if I put another time, it is going to show undefined and it's already done. And no matter how many times I put the next, it is always going to show undefined because there are no more values to show. It's always going to be 2, it's done, guys, it's done. Stop calling, it's done. It's like this. But now, this is not how you would use an iterator. Iterators are usually used like const item of iterator. You can use the for of on arrays because the for of searches for an iterator and uses it. But if you put an iterator already in the for of, you can use it as well. Then just console log item, and there you go. You see every item and you don't even need to see the object with the value in the done. Let's have a look. Here you are initializing a variable. So it means that if you are initializing that variable, and if the for of loop loops through everything that is in the variable, not straight in the array, this variable is used to save, to store a state. So if I put console.log iterator.next, what do you think is going to happen? Is it just going to show the first value here and show all the values here? Or show the first one here and then only the ones that were not shown yet, so only these three is going to be shown in the for? It's right, guys. If you show the first value, then when the for of is checking the iterator, oh, we have already shown this, so we are already going to the second, third and fourth. And the same is as well, if you put the 4 times here before, it is not going to show anything in the for of. But if you remove the last one, it is still going to show the C, right guys? Because this stores the state. But now, imagine that you have here, yes, you put the for of loop with a const item of iterator, and then you put the console log. You should everything. Now the iterator is already empty. If you want to show again the whole array with iterators only, you could create a second iterator and then iterate through the second iterator. This is just like an instance of an object. And as you can see, we receive 2 times the same array because, well, of the iterator. Because there are 2 different iterators. They can start again all over. And one last thing, if you copy this whole body and console log it .next, it doesn't matter how many times you do this, since it is never storing the state of the iterator, it is always going to start at the first value. So don't try to be cheap on variables, because if you don't store the state of it in a variable, it is not ever going to get out of the first value. Now, in order to create a custom object iterator, we are going to create an object, a simple one. Everything here is simple because otherwise I won't be able to make it. Let's start at 99 and end at 105. Something like this, just so it isn't too big. And then, to create an iterator, you still remember, right guys? The Symbol.iterator. If it is not in the Symbol.iterator property, it is not an iterator. Now, it is going to be equal to a function, because they are nothing more than a function. And yes, making this is not really that useful. It's just so you understand the syntax and a little bit better how it should go. Now some variables to make it easy to iterate. Object.start and then the end. But end shouldn't change because let's check. The start is going to start at the beginning, but is going to be incremented, while the end should always stay there to make a breakpoint. If you reach here, you cannot go further. Now we're going to return an object, not a next, but an object, and we are going to return the function next. If you wanted, you could put something like next, like a key should be, and then the function next. This is the most current syntax, but you are allowed to make this way, so it's faster. Now, the only thing you need to do is the verification if the start is smaller or equals to the end, so we can reach the 105. If we put only smaller, it only reach the 104. And then just put return an object. Remember what we saw, an object with a value. The value is going to be the start plus plus, so it gets incremented for the next position already. And you're also going to have the done as false. The done is always going to be false, while it's not yet done. And the value, this way, it's faster to write, because otherwise you would need to put the start plus plus anywhere else, and it would be kind of strange. So let's just put the plus plus after the start, alright guys? And then, if it's not, you could put an else, but you can just put a return. And the return just needs to return the done as false. If you want, you can put the value as undefined. Nothing left is to test it out, right guys? Object is the thing at the right, the collection of const item. Now let's try to console log this beast item. And as you can see, a couple undefined. Let's just remove this so it stops making the whole thing. We have a bug in our code. Oh no, it is not stopping. Well guys, it crashed my computer because I forgot. When it's done, I want it to be true. If it is already done, the only way of the for of loop to know that it was already complete is because it's the done true. And if I put the done false, you get this error. You don't give an error, you simply make an infinite loop and your computer is going to crash just like mine. So you have to pay attention. And then you can already use the for of loop with the object iterate, which is a collection, const item of, and then you just need console.log the item. And this way, you can see that we got the 99 until the 105. This is a simple iterator for an object, but let's recapitulate so you understand it really nice. So, an object iterator, not with the parentheses but without parentheses, we are not calling anything, we are just creating it, is equals to a function. That function has some values that is going to make conditions on later and returns an object. This object has the next function. It can have more functions if you put here the comma and then put attributes or functions, really up to you, but you only have a next function returning, and then you have an if. If we haven't reached the end yet, we return the value. If we have already reached the end, we say that it's done too. It's already done. And this is basically how every iterator goes. With the function, some values to condition, a return of the next inside an object, and then return the value and the done false or done true without a value. Now let's get to the real world examples. And in this first example, we'll be creating a class which is going to already have an inbuilt iterator. So every time you create an object, an instance of this class is going to be an iterable, an object with a default iterator. Let's make it. Class, my class, you can call it whatever you want. Constructor, you can put whatever properties you want really. Prop1, prop2, prop3, and then you are going to put the this.prop1 is equals to prop1. If you want, you can even put default values. This third one can be always to true, anything else if you want, a string even. And you can also make verifications if the value is defined or not, which is pretty safe and pretty nice to do. But we don't really want to focus on that too much. What we want to focus is on the class construction. You can also have some functions like get prop1, and this function will probably return or return in a different way the first property. However, this is not really what we want yet. What we really want to do, can you guess what it is? Symbol.iterator. And now guys, this is going to be a function, this is why I put a parenthesis, and then curly braces, and pa! This is a syntax you would need to use inside the class. So, inside of here, you can already make the normal things you would do with an iterator outside of it. And usually, if you want to make an iterator for an object, a class that you are going to make, you usually make it inside of here, so you don't need to have your code to things that are alike together. Now, what you want to do is probably receiving all of the properties of the object, and I'm going to make it so that you can use this piece of code in your code. You can simply copy this from my code to yours, so it is useful for you. Then let's just use the object.keys and receive the prop1, prop2 and prop3 of this object, of this instance. And basically the properties are now an array of all properties. This is what this const properties is now. Then, with all the properties, only thing we need to do is an index, which is going to start at the first property and is going to make us able to run through every property and also make some conditions, obviously. Return an object and you are going to have the next function. But instead of making a normal function, you are going to use the keyword function, because you want to preserve at all costs this keyword. Because this keyword is going to be what will help us reach every single element, property, attribute of this class. So let's just put two dots, parentheses, equals, and pa! There we go. Now, almost reaching the climax of the return, we are going to have a condition, which is going to be if the properties dot length, and I'm going to do it the opposite way. The index is smaller than the property's length, because an array starts at 0 and you want to always have the thing smaller than the length. In all programming languages, usually you want to have something being right before the property's length, because if it reaches the property's length, it is going to return undefined or even error index out of an array. Then you just need to get the actual property that you are going to use, so const property is going to be equals to the properties of index. You don't need to create this property, you don't need this variable, you can just put it straight away in the next return that we are going to make. However, it's easier to understand this way. And then put the plus plus, so in the next iteration it's already on the right index. And then just return the value of this object of the property that is supposed to work. And then the done is false. Done as false while it has a value. Now, if you want, you can put an else, but it isn't needed. If you see by the logic, if it is not this, it's something else. And if the program enters in this if condition, it is going to return it, so it is never going to reach this. It's basically an if else, but faster. And then you just need to return the done as true. You don't need to put the value. If you want, you can put values undefined, but you don't need to. And then this simple iterator is already working. You would normally make the rest, what I'm going to do now, the tests, in another file, because the class file is only for the class, right guys? But well, it doesn't really matter that much, right guys? It doesn't matter. Let's just try it out here. So, to try it out here, we would need to create a new instance of this class. So, const object, or my object, is equals to a new my class with the values high, 20, and I'm going to leave it at that because the third one has a property default as true, so I don't really need to put anything. I could, but I don't need. And then you could either extract iterator and use the next, or use it how you are going to use, how you are supposed to use is my object. So my collection is going to be here with the const item. So item is going to go through every enumerable property. Console log the item high, 20, true. Now, if you wanted, imagine that this true is not supposed to be shown here. It's not supposed to show. You don't want to iterate through the last one. You can make this property, this third property, not enumerable. And if it is not enumerable, this object.keys is not going to get it. It's not going to put it in the array. If you want, you can also remove it from the properties here, by hand or somehow. But it is easier to just make it not enumerable if you don't want it to show here. This is basically it for this first example. But if you yet want to learn more about returning objects with functions inside that return objects and functions, and understand this better, this concept of closures, why don't you go click in this video on the top right of your screen and check it out. Have a look on what are closures and how they work. This time, in this second example, we want to sort all of these tasks by priority. We are not going to create an iterator ourselves. We are going to use the normal iterator of the arrays, but you are going to try to make these sort them out. And to use this, you can use the sort of the array prototype. But there is a problem. This sorts ASCII character order, so it is by string, not exactly by integer. If you come see again, the 11 is bigger than 2 and 22 is bigger than, I don't know why this, but okay, this is not what you want, guys. Basically, if you want it to be sorted by numbers, it's how they are saying. You need to have two variables, the a and the b, and then make a subtraction. This way, if you put the a first, it is going to be ascending. If you put the b first, it's going to be descending order. But ours is going to be even more complicated, because we want to sort by priority of an object, of a property of an object. We don't want to sort it by numbers already, because we don't have the numbers. But it's not that hard, right guys? Just put a.property minus b.property. It's not, yes, it's a property, but it's not actually the right property, it's the priority, right guys? And then the only thing you need to do is use the for with the tasks, and the task is the collection task of, let's put this const, and now the only thing you need to do is put a bunch of console logs. So console.log, you can put something like template literals with the name and the priority. Yes guys, I know that it is giving an error, guys, don't bother about it. Now you just put the task, so you put the name and the priority as an example. Then you don't even need to put the pluses and all of that. And you can also put the description. So you just put the description with the task before. And then you can simply put some hyphens, so it is a little bit better separated. And as you can see, write script is the first thing to do, write things nobody will ever read. And then the second priority and the third in priority. In this, guys, is pretty simple. It was just to show how you could normally use these iterators in your codes, because if you don't use the for each, you could use the for of. In this case, you could use the for each because it's only showing stuff. But if you want to break it in the middle or something like that, you would need the for of as an example, to break or to return something in the middle of the iterations. You could also make this a function, like this, show task. You'd only receive a task, and this way you would use template literal perfectly, just how it was meant to be used. And this way you can even use the show task in more places of your code. Yes, this example is pretty lame. If you want to learn more about functions and callback functions inside functions, like the sort method in JavaScript, make sure to watch that video about functions inside functions and callback functions, basically. The harder functions and all of them. We are going to cover how you could do this, more specifically, some syntaxes and some way to adapt into something like this, because it could look a little bit strange for someone that isn't really too used to functions like this. Iterators are pretty complex. However, once you get the hang of it, you will be able to use them easily. And for that learning curve to be smoother, keep these tips in mind. If your goal is to make an iterator, make sure to implement the Symbol.iterator method in your iterator, so that your object becomes iterable. Because if you don't have the Symbol.iterator, the iterator is not an actual iterator, and your object is not going to become an iterable. Every iterator should have at least the next function. It can have more, but it should always have the next function inside an object. And this next function is always going to return an object with a value and a done of false, or without a value, or a value undefined, and a done as true. It's already done. If you don't say when it's already done, it is going to happen to you the same thing it happened to me in the beginning of the video, in where my browser crashed because I made an infinite loop, because the for of didn't know when to stop. When making your custom iterators, try to only include enumerable properties, the ones you are supposed to enumerate, right? Because if you don't do it, it is going to go through length and through prototype stuff, and you don't want that, you just want the enumerable properties. And if you don't know how to get only the enumerable properties, do it just like I have done in the video. Object.keys and the object inside of parentheses. This will return an array with all of the properties, the enumerable ones. You can choose the order in which the properties are iterated. An example would be, in Europe, Diogo, my first name, is in the beginning, and my family name is my last name, Diogo Veigas. But in some countries of Asia, the family name is actually first. So it would be something like Veigas Diogo. But in Europe it's Diogo Veigas, my family name it's in the end. You can use that to understand that iterators are supposed to show only what you want and in the order that you want. When working with iterables, make sure to use the for of loop. You can use the for in loop or the normal for loop, but you are not actually using the iterator this way. And it's not only that, you would even need to write more and add complexity to your code. So if you have an iterator available just for you to use it. Use with the for of loop. Be careful when working with iterators, because if you change the value of any property of an object while in the iterator, it should be a little bit troublesome, if you know what I mean. Broken date and expected behaviors for everywhere. Don't do it. Make sure that you don't change any value of the objects inside of the iterator. Iterators are already hard as they are, so try to put good names and document well your code. You could have an external document, comment your code right with the comments, and leave a cleaner code for everyone and even yourself to read it more easily, so it can digest it a little bit better. Don't be like that guy that is only trying something out and then makes the whole code like this, and not even himself knows what he is writing anymore. And this, guys, is pretty much everything you need to know about iterators and iterables in JavaScript. If you also want to learn more about closures in JavaScript, make sure to click in that video and prepare yourself to become an expert at it. Jokes aside, you are probably not going to become an expert at closures, but you are going to get a nice insight, and even if you don't really understand them, it's a really nice starting point. If you still have any doubts, leave a comment that I will help you out. I'm Diogo Veigas and I'll see you in the next video.